You're listening to Reference Desk, the Wicomico Public Libraries podcast that will connect you to your public library.
Thanks for tuning in to the Reference Desk, a podcast by the Wicomico County Libraries. My name is Vicki, and I work at the Center Branch Library. And today I am joined by my coworker and fellow gardening enthusiast, Amy.
Hello.
This month, we're looking ahead to spring. It may seem strange to think about gardening when it's possibly snowing outside, though on the Eastern Shore, you never know. We'll be discussing tips about getting started, the different layouts and options to grow your own garden, along with what plants grow best in our area. We'll also briefly go over timelines about when to start and different ways to start a garden. In an effort of full disclosure, we'd like to mention we are in no way professionals. We are simply people who are interested in gardening and learning new ways of doing it. I'm not sure about you, but the spring of 2020 saw me stuck at home with the kids and looking for anything to do outdoors that didn't involve me leaving the house. I've always wanted to grow a garden, so I figured now was as good a time as any to try it out. For the record, I did spend a bit of money at the start, some of which I learned later wasn't strictly necessary, but we all learn by doing and failing, don't we? To start, let's talk about options for hardware and layout, from the most expensive to set up to the least. The most involved, but likely the most long-lasting setup, would be raised beds. These can be fashioned by 2x4s, permeable fabric, plywood, along with some serious engineering. There are countless YouTube video tutorials on how to accomplish this, and if it's something you're interested in, feel free to explore and find the project that fits your needs and budget. And I know, Amy, you said your husband made some raised beds.
Yes. Our soil, unfortunately, isn't very great. It's very clay-like, and it likes to retain lots of water.
Lots of Eastern Shore dirt's like that.
Yeah. So we have raised beds, and a lot of it was reclaimed wood. Some of it wasn't. So we did spend a little money, and I like them because they're sort of raised up pretty high, and it's better for my back and neck.
Next, down the list of the price would be boxes or frames on the ground. Personally, this is what my family decided, and when I say my family, I mean I said this is what I want to do, and they're like, yeah, let's go. But basically all we did was took some 2x4s or 2x6s. You can use 2x8s, and some people even recommend 2x12s because they had the most depth, and screwed them together in a roughly square fashion and lined the bottom after you lay on the ground with permeable fabric, which you can find in most hardware stores and do-it-yourself stores, and then filled it with topsoil.
Yeah, the fabric, the gardener's cloth is important because it kind of deters the weeds. So make sure that's important. But really, you can make raised beds out of anything. I've seen concrete, sort of like a cross between raised beds and the container gardens or the metal wash tubs. I like the idea of going as low cost as possible and being really creative and upcycling. So I will admit, my mom even upcycled an old toilet that's now in her garden, and it actually holds cactuses. So it's definitely not a sit-down feature.
No, that would be very uncomfortable.
That's my mom.
That's lovely. The least involved method would actually just be to simply till up a patch of yard and get on with it, possibly placing a border somewhere around to minimize the weeds and grass encroaching.
Yeah, I think from my experience, what you make your beds out of is not as important as where you place your beds. So it's kind of where you want to know where you can grow, so make sure you pick a nice sunny spot. The sunlight is the most important.
It is, they like that.
Can't have too much shade to grow most of your summer vegetables. So keep an eye on where you want it, and then be creative from there, like what will fit, what's in your budget, and again, be creative and make it work for you.
Yeah. If yard space is a problem, or if you live in an apartment with no yard at all, there's always container gardens. They'll limit the type of vegetables you can grow, but it can still be rewarding and fun. When shopping for a box or a container, look for one with an adequate drainage, and bonus if it has a tray to catch any excess water. You can even use a plastic bin, drill holes in the sides near the bottom, and line the vessel or container with some fabric or canvas to keep out the dirt, or keep the dirt inside, but let the water get out. Plants that are great for container gardening include, but are certainly not limited to, peas, potatoes, onion, garlic, and a host of herbs.
Yeah, there are a lot of dwarf varieties now, so you technically can grow corn in your container garden on your patio. If you are going with more of a patio back deck kind of thing, then you can be also, again, really creative. Anything you can drill holes in. You might want to be careful because you might have to move it. So if it is pretty heavy, you might want to think about having something on caster wheels.
Ooh.
Or you can get grow bags with handles.
Oh, that's
so
clever.
You can kind of move them around as you need to.
Okay, that's clever. I never thought about casters, actually. I'm like, oh yeah.
If you've got a big
wheels.
plan, save your back.
Oh yeah, team lift. Those little boxes with team lift on it. With all these options, excepting possibly the till and grow method, you'll likely need to purchase or source some topsoil and or garden soil. I like to use a blend of both because the topsoil has a little bit more mulch in it and that's good for drainage, but the garden soil has like the nutrient dense soil and it's just nice and soft and it feels really great in your hands. But this is of course up to you. You can use whichever one you're more comfortable with and your budget can accommodate. Of course, you may find it's helpful to put some fencing around your garden if you live in an area with deer or rabbits in residence. Otherwise, you may find you're growing an all-you-can-eat buffet for Bambi and Thumb. Marigolds and other companion plants are really pretty to look at, but they also can help deter unwanted diners. So keep that in mind when you're shopping for seeds or seedlings and setting up your garden area. Think about if you want to put a companion plant because they can be a really nice way to make it brighten it up before all the plants actually grow.
Yeah, supposedly it keeps away insects as well as other furry creatures. And the only thing you have to be careful is because I tried companion planting last year, I wasn't, I guess, controlling enough with my companion plants, and my marigolds, which I did not know, can grow really, really tall. So since I wasn't keeping them around the right size, they were actually growing so big they were blocking the sun.
Before you till, build, or whatever you decide to do, let's talk about seeds versus seedlings.
Yes, some plants you can start indoors or by transplants, and then when it's warm enough to go ahead and plant them out in your garden. Now, for new beginner gardeners, I do recommend buying transplants. You may think it's a little bit of money up front, but there is definitely what I consider a level 2 of gardening skills, starting from seeds in your home before putting them out. And you have to be careful. Unless you have a really good growing spot, really bright natural room that gets a lot of sunlight, you might have to kind of be more creative with your seed starting section in your house. And that could include the little seed warming trays. It can include a lot of plastic trays and lights, grow lights. So it can be more expensive to actually seed start than just going out to buy transplants.
And buy seedlings, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can find them all over the place in the spring. These days, you also have the internet. The internet is a fantastic resource for acquiring seeds for whatever vegetable you may fancy growing. If you go for the seed route, in case you want to try that, the official frost-free growing season this year starts April 20th. So if and when you sow, make sure that you have that space inside to house them. For those who want to jumpstart and use seedlings, you can find them at most home improvement stores, but we like to support local businesses. So we encourage you to use the internet to search for a garden center near you. If you're scratching your head over when to start which plant, a great resource for planting times is the website garden.org/app. So garden.org/app. When you type in the zip code, all the veggies that can grow here are listed with times to either sow the seeds or transplant the seedlings.
Yes, I actually really like that website. I like to know exactly when the best time is to sow and just to start indoors. So I set up my little calendar, Google Calendar, and I put in all of the right dates just to kind of give me a range so I don't forget anything.
Yeah, I should probably do that. We'll go through some of the more popular ones today, but please don't let that stop you from exploring the variety of vegetation you can grow. In our area, because of our fairly wet summers and wild winters, as well as our central location on the eastern seaboard, we have a climate that can grow a large variety of fruits and vegetables. I'm going to go through a list by timing of different plants that you can grow. These are not the end-all be-all. Of course, there are others you can plant and grow depending on what you want. But these are some that need to be sown indoors or transplanted by early March. We've got asparagus, beets, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, northern peas, potatoes, tomatoes, beans, and chard. By late April, early May, you should have sown your gourds, your squash, your pumpkin, your okra, your southern peas, your cucumbers, your corn, chard, and eggplant. Because I guess chard can be planted. It's a little more flexible. You said even you could do 2 batches of chard.
Yeah, the chard can be a little bit more heat tolerant than a lot of the other greens. And when when it starts to cool for the fall, a lot of your greens can be in your early spring can be planted for fall as well.
And I heard that they actually taste better after that first frost.
Oh, especially kale.
Kale,
Yes.
yeah, because I was trying to grow kale last year. It didn't work out, but I tried. It didn't grow.
I love kale. It's actually one of my favorites to grow because you can just cut again and again, and so it lasts usually like the whole season for me.
I want to grow some kale because I like kale too.
It's inexpensive because it's a fancy vegetable.
Continuing on with our list, we also have transplants and sown by mid-May. You have like watermelons and radishes. Not a whole lot of them because then you get into that really hot area, and that can really fry those tender plants when they're growing. And it gets hot so quick here in the summer.
Yeah, it seems to be like, especially right now, we're talking about starting your seeds indoors. Even like your tomatoes, your peppers, and your eggplants that need to be started pretty early before it gets warm enough for them outside. It seems like we're doing this now, and it's just hitting that full winter with the snow, just in February, when it's time to think about your garden.
Yeah, of course. That's where your mind turns to gardens when it's snowing outside.
For the first time.
The first time in the whole winter. The growing chart for the area is a useful tool if you are just starting out, but it can be a bit confusing. And it was to me. There are different times for planting depending on whether you are planting seeds or transplanting seedlings. Look locally to source your seedlings. The larger farm stands in the area sell seedlings that are ready to go. And if you're just starting out, it can be a lot more rewarding as you can see the garden just come to life.
Yeah, my only mistake that I make every single year when I do buy transplants, I tend to look at everything that has, and I want to grow everything.
All the things.
So I tend to take more than I can possibly grow,
right.
Bite off more than I can chew, so to speak.
And literally sometimes.
Yeah. So my family loves me because my mother-in-law and my mothers get all the ones that I can't,
possibly eat, right?
Yeah, or plant. There's just not enough space.
I also learned that last year that you should not get one variety of each. You need to get at least 2 with a buffer of 3 in case one dies, because that'll happen naturally. Because cross-pollination, they need to be preferably the same species of like tomato plant or pepper plant or whatever. So you want to make sure you get at least 2, preferably 3 of each. And they have the 4 pods. Usually they sell them in 4 packs of seedlings.
And anything that really flowers is a good idea to have that, just in case it does need it.
Yeah, because they need that cross-pollination to actually grow fruit, or else you just have a really pretty plant that flowers and then dies, because that happened with my tomatoes. Keep in mind that many vegetables require a structure to grow up against, like tomatoes, peas, and beans.
Yes, I always plan for my stability structures. So like my cages and my stakes, I guess I'm lucky they just grow so well that they cannot handle my stakes, my plants. So everything tends to fall over the middle season and start growing horizontally no matter what I do.
As nature intended.
So plan ahead.
Yes. Squash plants, they may start small, but just make sure they are not kidding when they say to give 2 feet around each, because they will grow and take over your entire yard. Ask me how I know that. I found some spaghetti squash growing actually out of a spaghetti squash that I chucked in my compost bin, and I put it out in my yard, and it was everywhere.
Yeah, I find that compost gardening is probably the easiest way to start. Just start throwing your scraps out in your yard in the back corner, and next thing you know, all of the plants that you couldn't grow in your garden will be growing wild in your compost pile.
Everywhere. And it's like, what am I getting today? Tomatoes, squash,
pumpkins that I didn't even grow. They're there.
They're there. So yeah, sometimes it can be a lovely surprise. My neighbor was telling me, he was like, sometimes I'll use his compost from the year before to start his garden the next year, and he's like going through his squash plants and he finds a tomato. He's like, where did you come from? The compost pile, because we're doing a cold compost instead of a hot compost, and that doesn't kill the seeds
or weeds. So be careful about throwing weeds in there.
Right. No, my compost bin has plenty of weeds in it. Yeah, that's for sure. luckily, I also learned this past fall that spaghetti squash puts off shoots that will vine. So if you dedicate a little bit of time, you can control these behemoths up a short trellis to keep the squash from taking over entirely.
Yeah, we live in Deer Central, where it's like forest and then my yard. So we had to fence everything in, and we really like putting them out there outside, like in front of the fence, so they can grow vertically.
Because they will. They try to vine. I had a fencing that I put up to try to keep the cats out. Didn't work. But the spaghetti squash really liked growing into that, like everywhere in that fencing. And I was like, well, that's staying there till the plant's done.
Yeah, it's
that
great.
Fence isn't
So
going
if
anywhere.
you're growing squash, butternut squash, you can also do it if you grow beans that grow up. Perfect support right there.
Yeah. Mulching under your plants, that fruit on the ground, can save your life. Well, not literally, but things like strawberries that are softer skinned tend to deteriorate quickly in contact with the damp soil, and mulch can help avoid unnecessary fruit loss and have the added bonus of keeping the weeds to a minimum. So you might look into getting mulch not just under your fruiting plants, but like under all your plants to keep your weeding down. Mulch can be a little pricey, and it can be a little bit more like back-breaking work to get it spread out, and you want to make careful not to, especially if seedlings are already there, you want to make sure you don't destroy your seedlings. But it's worth it when you look at the fact that you don't have to weed as much.
And it also says that it helps retain the moisture, so there's not as much watering that will
Yeah, and those hot July days when we don't get rain for weeks, it'll be nice to be able to keep your garden, done. My next section is the homage to herbage. So herbs like rosemary and mint will grow as large a space as you give them, and it makes them perfect for container gardening, because we have to contain them or they will go everywhere. A large pot or container, again with adequate drainage, can house several varieties of herbs. If you want them to play nice, though, try planting taller growing herbs like chives and green onions along the creeping ones like mint and rosemary. Just don't let the cats sleep in it. That's doesn't end well. The herbs anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start your container garden, because you can do it inside or outside, and herbs are great for cooking and for a lot of things, and they're beautiful. And also, another thing that I like about herbs is once you plant them, a lot of them are perennials, so they'll keep growing back every year.
Cool. Growing your own food can be tricky, and it requires dedication and patience. The payoff is so worth the time and trouble, though. When we grew a garden for the first time last spring, I got the kids involved. They loved that they had permission to dig in the dirt, and we went out every morning and to either water the plants if it wasn't already raining, or to check the garden for weeds. When we got our first zucchini, of many, they are nothing if not prolific, it was cooked and consumed happily because we'd grown it ourselves. And I don't know about you, but fresh veg from the backyard just tastes better.
It really does. And I even found that kids that tend to be a little picky and don't try like new vegetables, if they see it and help them grow, they're more willing to try it. My 5-year-old niece was even willing to have, fresh sweet peas right out of the garden, and she actually enjoyed them. So yeah, my 2 tips though from learning from lots of experience is that you want to start small in your garden and expand slowly. You want to kind of give yourself enough room to grow stuff, but not too much that overwhelms. And if you're not quite sure about this new hobby, if you're a first-time gardener, definitely start small, because it can be expensive when you first start from scratch. You don't have the soil, you don't have the compost, you need the seeds. You want to try transplants versus seeds, or making raised beds. So start small, see if you like it, and then each year, if you're good, you can expand from there.
That's how you got your complex.
The huge thing that it's become.
Become your complex.
Yeah. And my other one, which is also really important because we've done this as well, is only grow what you're willing to eat. If you don't like yellow squash, for heaven's sakes, do not grow yellow squash.
Because you will have so much yellow squash.
Right. And people will avoid you because they know you're trying to offload all of this yellow squash.
Yeah. We discovered that a couple things we grew were like just checking the compost because no one ate it. Or I just brought it inside for it to go bad. Yeah. And then went in the compost.
Or
that's the life cycle.
Like 9 different pepper plants, and only you and your brother are the only ones who will eat the hot peppers. And then what do you do with all of those peppers?
Yeah. Yes. Spicy peppers in my home, I have to sneak them in things because they don't like spicy, they say. Yeah. They eat spicy all the time. They just don't know it. They just have they think spicy is visually peppers.
Yeah, and since I'm the only one who, my brother, will be the only ones who eat them, they grow so well in my garden. I have no problems with them. They're like the low maintenance plants. They're just so everywhere.
Yeah, they do, and they keep fruiting and stuff. All like I had to actually pull up my pepper plants because the frost had come, and they were still trying to grow.
Yes.
Bless their little hearts.
They just love us.
They were trying to
because
grow.
we don't want to eat them all the time.
Is that it?
They feel safe in our garden.
We're a safe space. So thank you so much for joining us at the Reference Desk this month. We hope you know a little bit more now than you did before about gardening.
Yes, and since, of course, we're the library, if you are interested in doing a little research before growing, we have a lot of great books that you can check out through our Books to Go program, or if you're digitally minded, we have Hoopla and our Libby/Overdrive that you can check out a lot of gardening books and seed starting books absolutely free with your library card.
And if you'd like, you can post a picture of your garden or your project to the Wicomico Libraries Facebook page. We'd love to see your projects. And that's it for this podcast. Get outside and get growing.
Future episodes of the podcast may include a variety of programming ranging from story time, craft, readers advisory, local interviews, discussions, community news, and etc. We also encourage feedback and suggestions.
Visit us online at www.wicomicolibraries.org. Search for Wicomico Public Libraries on YouTube and podcast channels. To give us your feedback, you may call 410-835-2353 or email us at podcast@wicomico.org.